Here is the news, Mary. Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, says government will no longer entertain negotiations with bandits on the basis of voluntary surrender. Speaking on the renewed onslaught against banditry on NTA's Good Morning Nigeria, the minister applauded the synergy among the Northwest governors while commending measures put in place to stall activities of the criminals.
If an intermediary comes to a governor with a bandit and the bandit says he has repented, blah, 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 probably you want to believe him. But today, I don't think any of those governors will deal with any bandit on terms of, surrender or no surrender. No. If you want to surrender, surrender voluntarily. We're not going to negotiate with you. And I think the measures that have been taken today are actually, they're actually working. Yes, we agree that there's the issue of, enforceability of these measures. But the fact that the measures themselves make it impossible or difficult for them to purchase motorcycles. Motorcycle is one of their greatest assets. Makes it impossible for them to, even exchange information. Make it difficult, not impossible for them to take. Or even when they succeed in kidnapping people, it's a bit more difficult for them now to even ask for ransom. And the fact that the cattle markets have been closed, so if you rustle cattle, what do you want to do with it? I think if we give these, measures, more time, they'll begin to even yield more positive results. But I agree with you absolutely that everybody must really be, his brother's keeper.
The information minister, who dated the spate of banditry-related violence in Nigeria back to 1911, says the Buhari administration means business to wipe out banditry, hence the recruitment of 3,000 vigilantes to fight banditry. Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors say they will resume work on compassionate grounds on Wednesday, October 6th. The national president of the association, Dr. Dare Ishaya, has been speaking on what informed its decision to suspend a 2-month-long industrial action this Monday. He told newsmen that the union made the decision after intervention from President Muhammadu Buhari, Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, and other top government officials, including Minister of Labour, Dr. Chris Ngige.
Government on all the issues that led to the ongoing strike.
And that ends the news update at this hour. Join us again at 1 for more news. I am Tessie Omeri.
This is the network service of the NTA.
Welcome to Insights, everyone. I'm Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. Thank you so much for joining us on Insights.
I hope to gain some clarity on today's episode of the program, and I hope our guest will provide insights on two key national issues. First is the seeming disconnect between the value of the Naira internationally and locally here in Nigeria in terms of purchasing power prerogative The other is politics and governance, and we will be looking at the social and constitutional imperatives for credible elections in Nigeria. Of course, Elizabeth Omori has an equally important national issue for us today. Elizabeth?
Well, we'll be taking a look at the imperatives of nationhood, the role of unity and national peace.
Of course, that's against the backdrop of Nigeria's 61st independence anniversary. Let's get started. In a floating rate exchange system, the value of a currency constantly changes based on the demand and supply in the forex market. Even when the value appreciates, demand for that currency also rises. In contrast, if and when the currency depreciates, it loses value against the currency against which it is being traded. We've continued to see this scenario play out with the Naira, and we hope to get some clarity on the matter. My guest is Isa Aliu Shatta, economic analyst and vice president, Conga-Pay. Welcome to Insight.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, great. Just a few days ago, on the NTA, on our breakfast show, it's quite a popular one, Good Morning Nigeria, the former president, Chartered Institute of Banking, Banking of Nigeria, Professor Segun Ajibola, implied that the Naira is strong locally in spite of its value internationally. Help me clarify that inference. In the context of purchasing power prerogatives or parity, how does one reconcile the disconnect between the value of the Naira locally and its value internationally?
Well, the reason is not far-fetched because if you look at the Nigerian economy, basically, we are import-driven than export-driven. And when you have the supply and demand curve constantly, fighting against each other, what you see is there will be a disequilibrium, in the system, in the curve. Then that gives you a sort of concern because in Nigeria, the same item you're going to purchase for a particular amount, that's in Naira, you cannot use that same value of Naira to purchase that same item outside Nigeria. And that is because nobody recognizes your currency globally for trading. And before you can actually attain that, height, you will understand that you should be able to have a lot of export-driven products that is competitive in the international market. Then your currency can be very, very strong when you are talking about international trade. But then, if you even look at the currencies that they use in classifying the SDR, that's the special drawing rights, even with the IMF and World Bank, you will discover that the currencies that they use basically are dollars, pounds, yen, and Japanese yen and euros, basically. So if you look at it closely, you will see that Nigeria is actually struggling against these currencies I've measured. I've mentioned, rather, as the case may be. So that will ordinarily tell you why Nigerian currency, that's the Naira, will continue to have a depreciating value externally and a slightly appreciating value internally.
So we're mostly aware of the exchange rates and volatility, the scarcity of the dollars, and of course there's also the issue of speculators making a premium from the currency crisis. All of these have pushed or helped push the Naira to its current level of depreciation. But my issue really is why Nigerians have this obsession with the dollar so much that there is this excessive demand for dollar, even when the person or persons whose livelihoods have little or no bearing to the dollar. Persons who do not even have any business with importing or manufacturing. So aside the key issues that we've raised that you have talked about, how do we disabuse the minds of Nigerians on the excessive dollarization of the Nigerian economy? I'm sure you're aware that some schools here only accept fees in dollars.
Yes.
What can be done to de-dollarize our minds and create room for internal growth with little or no external support?
Yeah, I think basically it's a psychological issue, and the psychological issue that is triggered by the kind of political and economic environment we operate here. Because if you look at it, if the elites are dollar-driven, it's suffice to say that the followers will also want to key in, because when we have unnecessary display of foreign currency, in our society, what do you expect? There's going to be a trigger down the line. So there's a multiplier effect. After all, when you see that this, unambiguous way of displaying foreign currency is there. So we need to really tweak our policies, because for me, it doesn't really make sense when, a particular institution is demanding a foreign currency in our own country. So it means that our policies, even if they exist, they are not properly executed. So who is in charge of monitoring these processes to ensure that policies that have been passed, or policies that actually passed through the legislative platform and has been enacted into law and be signed by the executive, it means that somebody is going against the laid rules and regulation of our country. Somebody is going against, the fundamental framework that guides the operationalization of our currency in the country, and nobody is saying anything, because I believe that those who are responsible, those who are supposed to be monitoring the scene, can hear what is going on and can also see. But they keep quiet because they are also part and parcel of the bandwagon of the dollarization of the economy. So I feel that we need to be very, very aggressive in terms of implementing our policies. We need to be true to ourselves, to understand that we need to inculcate those values that we actually want to preach in the first place, so other people can copy. So when we are so docile, or we are so relaxed about the same law that we pass, and we expect someone else to actually, do the same thing, do the different thing when we are doing the same thing, I think it doesn't make sense generally. And at the same time, we also need to begin to consume what we produce locally, because if you look at it, when you talk about the ease of doing business, for crying out loud, it is easier for me to get an item I'm going to produce here in Nigeria cheaper, shipping them from outside the country and selling them at a premium.
What you mean is that, if I'm getting you correctly, is that it's cheaper to import from, say, China.
Yeah.
And the importer would make premium gain on that goods rather than produce the same goods in Nigeria.
Exactly.
Isn't that part of the challenge?
It is one of the fundamental challenges, because if you look, that's aggregates.
Why are we not incentivizing production here in Nigeria?
Yeah, that aggregates to you all the factors of productions. One, do you have stable electricity? Two, what are the costs of these materials? How do you transport these local materials, the raw materials, from where you get them in the rural or peri-urban centers to the point of where you manufacture this product, for instance? What is the cost of labor, right? What is the cost of you paying multiple tax? Because currently we are even having that, which is for me is laughable. We are having that fight where the state and the federal government is fighting as to who has the right to collect VAT. So these are things that I feel should be fundamental right from the foundational level. So it's laughable, because if the world hears that, it shows that we don't really have what you call internal cleansing when it has to do with policies and economy decisions. So I believe that we are supposed to, first and foremost, understand all these factors that I've talked about, for you to know that these are the processes of doing business, ease of doing business, not just me going on CAC portal and registering my company within 2, 3, 4, 5 days, and I get my certificate, and you tell me that's ease of doing business. For me, that's not ease of doing business. That's the starting point.
Ali Shatta, I mean, there are policies in place, that promote production. Why these policies are not
properly implemented?
Yes, catapulting us into, we will talk about these issues down the line, but so we don't, let me just backtrack a bit and ask you a question. Would you concur with those who say Nigeria is trapped in a misaligned economic structure occasioned and rooted in the structural adjustments program nearly 4 decades ago, which had failed to deliver on promises made?
I think I disagree. because from 1959 to, of course, 1989, when you had the structural adjustment program, which is what a lot of people have been talking about, that was exactly the foundation of, crippling the Nigerian economy. I disagree, because in 1999, when we had the return of democracy, let's assume that the IMF loan that we collected at that time has actually crippled our economy. Then we had forgiveness, debt forgiveness, which means we are supposed to start on a clean slate. So, but the managers of the economy at that time tried, to bring in policies that could stabilize the economy for us, right? And I felt that at that point, we were supposed to have brought key enabling indicators that would have catapulted us into making the economy work smoothly and projecting into the future. Yes, we had best brains at that time who came around to give us, what seems like a workable economy. But I'm not proud to say that in the last 6-7 years, we've had it right. So, but something fundamental is wrong.
We've not done the proper adjustment, not for the short term, not for the medium and the long term?
At all. We haven't. Because if you had taken that into consideration, we would know exactly what are trending vis-a-vis the economic indicators that gives you massive employment generation, right? The economic indication that gives you a stable inflation rate, the economic indication that gives you somehow a floating balance between the demand and supply of the dollar, which means if we had plugged in the variable or the verticals that will connect our economy into us producing and manufacturing more, projecting into the future, because we've got the population, we've got the market. Then we have all the adjoining countries that are close to Nigerians that are also, for me, as far as I'm concerned, a virgin market for us to go in. So everybody respects Nigerian economy. If we can give them the quality and best produce or products, as the case may be, they will consume it. So we have the market.
Yes.
So why are we not intensifying the effort to ensure that we genuinely, like you rightly said, pursue those policies to the letter so that we can get the maximum result that we desire?
You bring up the issue of Nigeria's population, and that will take me back to another question on the subject of consensus. And I'd like to ask, again, do you agree or differ with those who argue that Nigeria's economy or economic challenges are exacerbated by our, let me say, the added pressure now of an exploding population? One, the paradox of an increasing depleting income from a fast depleting asset, and I mean crude oil. Again, there's also the huge national infrastructural gap. There is also youth unemployment, and yet again, there's the global economic order, which may be different from what we are accustomed or used to. Of course, alongside the inability of the elite to drive a consensus around which way to move the country forward. Is it not crunch time for us as a country? Are we still headed down to crunch time?
It's sad. It pains me when we have to talk about Nigeria at this level, because for me, most of the answers that we require or the solutions are actually written on the paper. They are best written on the paper, but we are not executing them.
So it's a function of implementation?
Yes, and I'll walk you through it.
Please.
We always have a budget, right, that I feel is a copy and paste, year in, year out, whereby what you have is a template of what is going to be spent.
But there are parameters to measure implementation.
But
there is oversight function by the National Assembly.
But what result have we gotten from those monitoring and evaluation mechanisms that are supposedly be in place?
And these parameters are also cushioned and structured for the short term, for the medium term. Isn't that what we do?
But you will ask yourself, what is the ripple effect at the end of the day? Those who are supposed to be measuring this performance, the key performance indicators, are those who are actually in the community. Now, if those in the community who these projects are actually meant, to better their lives, are complaining, their livelihood is actually not moving from point A to point B, it means there's a problem, in the system. So you cannot be the same person executing a project and still be the same person saying that project has been well executed. You definitely need an independent person or people, rather, as the case may be, to be able to give you that scorecard that you desire. So that is just one aspect. You talk about financial inclusion, for instance. Financial inclusion is supposed to drill down whereby people who are financially disconnected, from the financial ecosystem can be brought into the financial ecosystem, but not just giving them access to finance like we are having, but create an enabling environment for them to be able to earn decently from the parameters that have been set for financial inclusion strategy. I will give you an example. If, for instance, you said you are intervening for farmers, okay, now you intervene XYZ, whether in fertilizer input, right, or whether you have given them a certain amount of money for them to buy seedlings, for them to hire more labor, for them to expand the hectares of land. What are the key indicators that you are using to measure that this particular farmer is actually progressive? When you connect them into the financial ecosystem, there will definitely be a period of gaps, shocks, as the case may be. So during that period, have you given them access to microcredit, micro-insurance, micro-pension, or micro-savings? No, these are the key connectors that gives them additional means of getting additional income, and at the same time improving their livelihood without government necessarily putting a lot into the system, but providing the platform where all these stakeholders can come together to connect on this value chain that can better the economy. So this is just one example out of many. That's the reason why I said most of the key indicators or the success rates that we are supposed to have are best written on paper, but they are not properly executed. And it's not as if we lack the brains. We have the brains here in Nigeria. But all we need to do is that zeal, that power, that passion, that burning desire to say that I want to be able to make a difference at the end of the day. Because the way we currently run government, we don't run government as if it's a business. We need to run government as if it's a business because it actually needs to generate income. That is the reason why we are having, this, cry for us to generate more incomes in the system, because what we depend on, the mono economy, the crude oil, is not serving us right. Even the agriculture that we are saying we want to diversify the economy with, it's not properly utilized. We are just seeing what I call like a smoke screen display of a sort of pyramid rise, pyramid this, pyramid that. I mean, it is high time we woke up from slumber.
We're actually making some inroads in agriculture. I can assure you. We've moved from the days of subsistence agriculture now to commercial agriculture, and we're actually making gains in the cultivation and of some crops where we have comparative advantage. But I have a final question for you before I let you go. And of course, you talked about shocks. You talked about social insurance and having shocks to cushion and some of this. So help me put some things in perspective about subsidies and balancing social insurance investments in, how do I put it, social insurance investments in an era of depleting resources like we talked about our national reserves, and put that against our continued strive for free market reigns and the rather lackluster performance of Nigeria's manufacturing sector. I did some bit of research and interestingly noticed, for instance, that a barrel of palm oil costs more than a barrel of crude oil today. I was also amazed by the fact that Apple, the tech giant, of course we all know Apple, today has over $1 billion in stashed offshore cash compared to Nigeria's external reserve of less than $35 billion. These comparisons may not align or suffice, but it makes me wonder if we're doing enough to engage some key tools, and you've talked about them, you've mentioned them, to build up our domestic manufacturing sector. In fact, some would say Nigeria already has policies in place. There are policies, I can tell you. There is the temporal trade protection, subsidized credits, preferential taxes, and publicly supported R&D for businesses. But why are these industrial policies not catapulting manufacturing in Nigeria in a free market environment and sparking the desired effect for export and so on? Unfortunately, I mean, why is that not happening for us?
Well, I mentioned part of the challenges in my opening glee when I talked about the factors of production. Now, you don't expect a manufacturer, right? He would definitely look at the cost of doing business.
Yes, you
Then
talked
at the
about the ease
at
of
the end
doing
of the
business.
day, he wants to measure that with his ROI, return on investment.
Okay.
And he has like a timeline for deliverables because it's his personal money that is putting into the business. And he wants to be able to make profit at the end of the day. Now, I will give you a simple example. You talked about the barrel of palm oil. Do you know that currently Nigeria imports palm oil from Malaysia and from other countries? And even if our own palm oil is far more richer or better than that of Malaysia, which we gave actually the knowledge of farming this produce in the first place, Nigerians will still prefer to patronize that of the Malaysian market than patronizing that of a Nigerian market. Now, when you drill down, they will begin to tell you something around quality assurance. They'll begin to tell you something around the quality of the product itself. But something that I feel differently about what we do is even in the electrical space. There's this cable that you purchase. There's the one for foreign and the one for Nigeria. Now, the one for Nigeria, a lot of people go for that of Nigeria because of its durability.
Yes.
So that tells you that we have content.
Yes,
that
and it's
tells you
actually
that we
more
have
expensive.
quality. Yeah, it's more expensive. That shows that we have quality.
Yes.
So if every manufacturer can actually key into this line to know that, look, Nigerians don't actually have a bias in terms of purchase or choice of purchase. But all Nigerian wants is quality. And if they got the quality, they'll go for it. The second aspect is the market space. Right now, everybody is going e-commerce. Now, there are a lot of manufacturers, there are a lot of producers who are struggling to have their products on, but we have quality products. But where is the market space? They don't have that fund to actually advertise. But if you promote that e-commerce site, right, and we're able to introduce new products on that side, Nigerian-made products, and Nigerians test the product and understand that the product has quality, they will go for it. So we are creating a platform, then the government can support those who have this platform, you understand, and give them that enabling vibes that they need for them to be able to project most of all these items. Who says Nigeria as a country cannot also float an e-commerce site, a marketplace, where we can promote what is locally produced in Nigeria for Nigerians to consume?
I know there are a couple of players already doing that in the Nigerian market.
Yes. If you permit me to mention my name, of course.
No, please don't do that. That would be so.
I will do that.
That would be LTP. What we call you will pay for that. It to be an advert.
Yeah.
Issa Aliu Shatta, economic analyst and vice president Conga Pay. I want to thank you so much for coming on the program. It's been a delight, of course, listening to you and getting your insights on this very important matter. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you very much for having me.
Our next conversation will center on politics and governance, and we will be looking at the constitution and moral imperatives for credible elections in Nigeria. My guest is Dr. Stephen Iroro Izu. Dr. Izu has a PhD in political economy and development studies. He is currently a lecturer in the Department of Political Science and International Relations, University of Abuja. Welcome to Insights, Doc.
Pleasure.
But of course, I'm sure you're more versed than I am in the idyllic tenets of democracy and its workings around the world. But let's begin our conversation by creating the fundamental basis for credible elections as one of the core elements for democratic advancements in society or a society like ours. Can you speak specifically to that issue?
Okay, thanks for the opportunity to be here today. Welcome, viewers. Now, there is no gainsaying the fact that elections are at the heart of liberal democracy. Liberal democracy all over the world is anchored on credible, free, and fair, and periodic general elections. That means if elections are effective, automatically the democratic template will become defective. That means here we have credible election, there is a possibility for us to have democracy that can be sustainable and can also conduce to the welfare and the betterment of the generality of the citizenry. Now, when we talk about elections, it's not enough to conduct elections that democracy can be sustained or consolidated. What really matters is how elections are conducted, how the voters are mobilized, how issues of voter apathy, are completely eliminated. We know that in our part of the world, it is still very, very unpredictable and sometimes very, very dicey. When we talk about credible election because of the mentality that still subsists in the consciousness of politicians. That mentality that has to do with brutality, that has to do with survival of the fittest, that has to do with winner takes all, to do with might is right. To that extent, elections are seen as a do or die affair. That is not a democratic mentality. The credibility of elections is essentially anchored on the principles of fairness, principles of equity, the principle of choice participation, not forced participation.
I hear you, Dr. Izu. I hear you, and I hear you loud and clear. I wonder if you can hear me from my end, because I would like to stop you at this point, or rather interject and ask you a question, if you don't mind. Great, fantastic. So, I haven't established the basis for democracy as an essential tenet or catalyst for the advancement of democratic ideals and in any society. Some would argue that part of the challenges with elections emanates from the political parties and their lack or the apparent, let me not say apparent now, but the lack of internal democracy in the parties. The argument is that, often is that if internal democracy flourishes within the parties, particularly in the emergence of candidates for elections, as opposed to imposition of candidates and fitful tinkering of party rules in favor of particular what people call as particularistic agenda, and maybe things would have been better. Is this an argument you concur or you vary with?
Now, there is no way democracy can be realized or the gains of democracy can be realized on a national scale or on a large scale without first having it operationalized within the parties. You know that modern democracy is essentially party-based.
True.
And so we have this idea of party supremacy. That means political parties are at the center of conducting not just elections, but determining the sustainability of democracy on a large scale. So when we have intra-party democracy intra-party democracy or primary internal party democracy that is not well, calibrated, it is definitely going to have direct impact on democracy on a national or on a large scale. The problem we are having in our country is the fact that we have not enjoyed, the political parties have not been able to ensure, a high level of intra-party democracy in terms of participation of members in selecting their leaders, in terms of having, clean and democratized delegate lists for elections, in terms of having an accountability of leaders of the parties to the members of the party. When we are not able to guarantee, such internal democracy within parties, definitely is going, a metamorphose into a large-scale disaster. So internal democracy is a source to sustainable democracy on a large scale. Without internal democracy within the political parties, it is hard to imagine that we'll have real sustainable and consolidated democracy on a large scale.
Once again, I hear you, and I hear you quite loudly. I know electoral reforms. I mean, we haven't identified these issues and the challenges. I know electoral reforms are still in play at the National Assembly. And of course, we must commend our lawmakers for working assiduously to make things better. However, sometimes I reflect on the past, and I cannot help but think that certain developments occur as a result of our past catching up with us. Some would therefore say that when we think about reforms, these reforms should not be the kind of, the kind of some persons have described as tinkering around the edges kind of reform that can not honestly transform Nigeria. Ultimately. Doc, how radical, or should I say moderately aggressive, I beg your pardon, can electoral reforms go to ensure credibility in the process, electoral process, of course, and the deepening of democratic ideals in Nigeria?
Yeah, thank you very much. I want this, from the, from this that by elections, yes, determined the quality of electoral acts or our electoral laws. But you know that our electoral laws cannot supersede the provisions of our constitution. Our
of course.
electoral are offshoots or springs of our constitution, that is 999, which is the grand norm in our country.
Of course.
So now, whatsoever we are going to do, within the ambit of the electoral law, must, be derivative from the main law, main constitution itself. Having said that, I want to note that electoral reform, have been historical when it comes to our political life in this country. However, have not been holistic and comprehensive, and if I may say, radical enough to engender the true spirit of and democracy and democratization in Nigeria. Now, if we are going to reform our electoral act, if we are going to make it very, very and very, very productive and conducive to favorable democratic process in Nigeria, one, electoral reform must be anchored on the fact that it creates a level playing field for every citizen that wants to participate in politics or in election. Today, the issue of independent candidacy is still a mirage. The constitution or the electoral reform has not, accommodated such reality. So, if you want to contest election, you must join any of the party, even if they do not ideologically, support your aspiration for the country. So that is one. Second, our country today is a highly educated country. And Nigerian citizens are highly educated. And yet, the constitution, the electoral laws of the country, make it such that you only need a minimum qualification to assume any position in the country. Where we have educated minds, we have a lot of universities, and so we're not lacking in educated minds. So any electoral reform that does not also accommodate the issue of saying, for instance, there should be a minimum of a bachelor's degree for those who are going to hold public trust on behalf of the citizenry, such electoral reform is, for me, is already deformed. So more than that, this idea of saying that before political parties will be registered or recognized by the Independent National Electoral Commission, the party must have this kind of a federal character.
Yes, national spread.
National coverage. I think that is the reason why we have a lot of mushroom parties in this country, a lot of inactive and immobile, political parties in this country. Because in advanced democracies, where the country we look up to, there are political parties that may not be interested in contesting for presidential election or the seat of the president or contesting for any National Assembly, positions. Maybe they only want to contest for a local government seat or a governorship seat and so on and so forth. Or need to be amended to accommodate political parties that may not be interested in national elections or presidential elections or National Assembly election, but just want to concentrate on in their local, vicinity, in local politics, where they want to, where they have interest in. So the electoral laws we have, should be done in such a way that it accommodates not just everybody, but the best of Nigerian citizens.
Well, very, 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 very well there. Doc, I would like your view on why and how issues like, of course, because you raised some of these issues earlier, why issues like incumbency factor, godfatherism, and excessive monetization in politics can be a thing of the past in Nigerian politics? Or do you think that is a mirage, in the immediate future? How can our laws or laws already passed, signed, and in play help, through proper implementation, of course, help to curb these abnormalities?
Yeah, let me try to make a point here that the issue of godfatherism is not peculiar to Nigerian
very, very true.
democracy or Nigerian politics. Godfatherism.
But it is the such here, or what we've seen play out here, is that the relationship evolves to a point where it begins to negatively impact or hamper progress in a state.
Yes, of course. Now, the more democracy grows, the more democracy, subsists, the more it becomes refined. Now, there's what we call democratic conscientization. Now, when the more citizens are conscientized, the more they become conscious of the relevance of democracy in bettering their collective social existence, the more they will want to ensure that democracy or the democratic process is not endangered. Now, the godfathers, I'm afraid, they will still be visible in Nigerian politics for a period of time. Because the level of democratic conscientization is still very, and that is where, bodies like CSOs, civil society organizations, NGOs, and right groups need to come up to ensure that citizens are adequately conscientized on the visibility of democracy, bringing about possible and positive changes in their collective social existence so that they can be the watchdogs of democracy. As far as you have, a large-scale poverty, as far as you have large-scale unemployment, as far as you have large-scale, underemployment, you will have people who will not be able to determine, their own, will not have independence of their own decision making. They will allow themselves to be used as stooges, as toys, by these godfathers. But if everybody has minimum level of socio-economic survival, they will not. If people are working, for instance, They will not allow themselves to be used as tools or used as whatsoever, and stooge in the hands of anybody. So it is because of the fact that a few who are rich feels that they can still manipulate the many that are poor because of their poverty. That is why this idea of godfatherism, keeps coming up. So coupled with this is the fact that Nigerians are still largely driven by this parochial, political culture, which is rooted in primordialism, which is rooted in this sentiments and emotions and affective orientation and so on and so forth.
And that, of course, has to change. Unfortunately, Doc, we were battling the dual challenge of time and internet connectivity from your end. But like I said, we're almost out of time. But I'll take a final question just before I let you go. Real quick, I would like to, something I find quite puzzling, and democracy, of course, by its very nature, is supposed to create an ideological framework where there's consensus building, exchange of ideas, and the consensus building amongst people, not just within parties, but in other parties as well. But the situation in Nigeria is one that, even though we know, and you would agree with me, that democracy can also be organic, could vary from country to country. But yet the process of arriving at consensus is somewhat always difficult, and, I don't know. But how do we arrive at a point or a stage where the exchange of ideas and the finding and constructing of point of resonance can lead to proper consensus building and institutional change?
Yeah, I want to make two related points here in answering the question. Now, the first is this. Democracy cannot survive where there are no Democrats. Now, democracy can only survive where we have politicians whom we could call Democrats. Politicians whose inclinations, whose appetites, whose attitude have been largely democratized to the extent that in policy making, in project implementation, in program formulation, they consider the demos, the people, as the centrality of their actions, inactions, and reactions. So we must begin to ensure that Nigerian politicians evolve into people that we can call democrats. There is no way to have despots, tyrants, or authoritarians, succeeding in a democratic system. Secondly,
real quick, Doc, because we're actually out of time totally. If it's possible in just 10 seconds, please.
Okay. Now, Nigeria requires some form of rotational presidency to gain stability in our country, because Nigeria is multicultural and every segment and sector of the country must have a sense of belonging for the country to experience a form of stability. Because all this anti-state insurrection that we are seeing today are the result of some form of frustration, aggression. So Nigeria must begin to ensure that every zone have a feel of the #1 seat in this country. And I'm referring to regional presidency, because where we have centrifugal forces overshadowing centripetal forces is not good for the country.
I hear you again, Doc. I know we've been talking about the moral and constitutional imperatives of elections for deepening democratic ideals, but you just made allusions now to the moral imperatives for representative governance and representation in a country like ours in Nigeria. Dr. Stephen Iroro Izu, political economist and democratic development expert, of course currently a lecturer in the Department of Political Science and International Relations, University of Abuja. I want to thank you so much for coming on Insight. It's been a delight, pleasure actually having you on set, having you over there via Zoom. I'm hoping that sometime real soon you will be able to come into the studio so we can have this conversation, from another angle. Thank you so much indeed for coming on the program.
Pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, viewers.
Elizabeth Omoru is up next.
Thanks for joining us. The head note of an article by Shodunke B. Abayomi, Suberi and S. Tayo says, in any pluralistic nation such as Nigeria, harmonious coexistence of citizens, irrespective of ethnic groups, tribes, religion, and political affiliations is a necessity if the spirit of nationhood is to be acknowledged. But considering agitations posing threats to the nation's oneness, it now leaves much to desire, more so in the face of progress and national goal attainment. Since gaining independence in 1960, addressing issues of ethnicity have always been in the front burner. Where are we in the journey of oneness and governance? My guest is a public analyst, Mr. Michael Abehe. Thanks for joining us on Insight.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, since 1960 till date, how would you assess the Nigerian story, governance-wise, and the quest for unity?
Well, I think it's been one of a roller coaster. We've had our fair share of good governance. Also, we've had a fair share of bad governance. Okay. But to say the least, it's like moving forward 10 steps and move backwards another 100 steps. But I think it's time for us to look inwards and see how best to find a solution to good governance and how best we can take the good part of being a nation and sieve out the bad parts. How do you govern your people?
Okay, I understand that democracy has its benefits and then challenges as well.
Yeah.
But every nation experiences diverse challenges.
True.
But in our journey of democracy, have we fared well?
Well, I mean, some people will tell you the worst democracy is better than the best military administration. But when you begin to measure with the successes of either of the governments, you begin to ask yourself, is democracy really better for us, or is military regime better for us? But I mean, in this millennium we have today, everyone is practicing democracy. But if we have to do it, we have to do it right. We have to do it in a way that everyone is involved, not everyone has to be seen to be involved in governance, whether it be from the north or from the south, from the east, from the west. We have to bring everyone on board so that the nation can move forward.
The nation can move forward. Now, I'd like to take you on the issue of the theme of our 60th independence celebration, which is togetherness. Of course, division is not an option. Yeah. We have come too far to see ourselves going separate ways. What are the imperatives of unity and oneness?
Basically, imperative of unity and oneness is, first, there must be justice, there must be equity, there must be fairness. I mean, if one part of the country feels agitated or feels cheated, there's bound to be division. But if we have a united front, there's equity, there's justice for all. No section should be treated better than the other. We're one nation, we're one Nigerian. I mean, the founding fathers had the reason for bringing us together. There must be fairness, there must be equity. Everyone must have a sense of belonging in the nationhood called Nigeria.
You know, every time we talk about oneness, unity, national peace, people do talk about religion, the role of religion and the traditional institutions. Where have we gotten it all wrong?
I remember in 1993 when we had the elections for MKO, Abiola, and I think Bamaga Tuko. MK Abiola and King Ibe ran a Muslim ticket. Nobody raised eyebrow. I mean, today you can't even try that. Everybody will shout, no, it can't be Muslim. Oh, no, it has to be Muslim, Christian ticket. I mean, we should talk about what is good for us as a nation first. I mean, yes, we know we have a religious nation, but it's not about being religious. What is good for the nation? Everybody should speak Nigerian first. what is good for Nigeria. Whether you're a Christian, whether you're a Muslim, we have to go back to the drawing board. We have to go back to what used to unite us. We have to go back to what used to keep us together as one. Then if we can get it, then we'll go back to those days that Nigeria used to be a great nation. I still believe Nigeria is a great nation. I still believe we can get it right. But we have to get it right with governance.
Okay. Now, from your explanation, it means there are barriers hampering our togetherness. So how do we break these barriers?
First, we have to look at equity.
Okay.
Everybody has to play a role in nation building. We have to bring everyone together. We have to talk to each other with respect. We shouldn't speak, no, I'm from the north, I'm from the south, or I'm from the east. We should speak one nation, and that nation is Nigeria. If we can get that right, begin to talk to each other as brothers, as sisters, as one country, then we'll move it a step at a time. But we can get there if we come together as one. We can get there.
Together as one. All right, national integration is a positive aspect, and it reduces social cultural differences. From your points that you highlighted, would you say there is more to integration in our drive to strengthen our bond as a people?
We need to do more in integrating ourselves as a nation. First, we have to think first as Nigerians. I mean, when they ask you where you're from, just say you're Nigerian. I mean, you can say, oh, I was born in Edo, like for instance, I'm from Edo State. You know, if you go outside in the United States, the United Kingdom, they just tell you that I'm from the United States. I was born in Georgia. They won't tell you I'm from Georgia. They won't tell you I'm from Okbela or something. We should begin to have a sense of belonging, whether you're from the north or from the east, from the west. You know, we should begin to speak that oneness. If we can speak that, then, for instance, I was born in Edo, I've lived in Lagos, I schooled in Zaria, I've lived in Kaduna, I'm in Abuja, I've done business in the east, everywhere. I'm a true Nigerian. We should begin to see ourselves as one. If we can do that, then somebody from Edo State will not feel cheated if he goes to Kaduna State and somebody in Kaduna will say, oh, you are not from here. No, we should live as one and see this nation as one indivisible entity.
One indivisible entity. Yeah. Now, I would like to take you back on the issue of governance. Now, in driving a prosperous nation, what are the extra efforts we need to make?
First, we have to look at integrity, capacity to deliver. These are very key points to drive a nation. We have to look for people who think and breathe Nigeria. Not personal gains, not personal interests, not sectional interests. A true Nigerian leaders. We have them. Let's get them. We are preparing for 2023. Now is the time for us to search for competent leaders so we can move this country forward.
All right, Michael Abe, public analyst, thank you so much for your contributions on Insights.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's it on this episode of the program. To join us same time next week for more on Insights. I'm Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. Be your brother skipper. We'll see you next week.
NTA Tuesday Live, analytical, in-depth, educative and interactive on national issues accommodating all sides of opinions.
We as a people have understood that we have to fight corruption before it fights us back.
Poverty has a financial index, so it should be fought also with a financial weapon. Give it to the social investments program. It has been a very courageous battle.
Tuesday Live, every Tuesday at 10:30 p.m. Join us.
Stop this senseless. International Teachers' Day is observed every year on October 5th to consider issues relating to teachers and the teaching profession. It focuses on appreciation, assessment, and changes required for teachers, while key players, especially in government, deploy means to honor teachers for their contribution towards attainment of educational goals and national development. The theme for this year's is Teacher at the Heart of Education Recovery. It's to showcase the effect of coronavirus pandemic on teaching globally. On Panorama today, coming to you live from the Lagos Network Center of the Nigerian Television Authority, we will highlight effective and promising policies response aimed at establishing the steps to be taken to ensure that the teaching profession develop their full potential. My guest is already seated here. I am Kende Adebisi. We'll be right back. Nigeria has made a strong case for all the parties in the dispute over the last parliamentary election in Ethiopia to bury the differences, come together and chart a new course for the unity, progress, and general well-being of the country and its citizens. President Muhammadu Buhari made the submission in a goodwill message to government and people of Ethiopia at the inauguration of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed for a second term in office. State House correspondent Adamu Sambu reports.
The massive turnout of Ethiopians at the iconic Meskel Square, Addis Ababa, for the inauguration ceremony clearly shows the level of popularity, acceptability, and respectability of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed in Ethiopia, regarded as the mother of African independence. In the last parliamentary elections, for instance, that guaranteed the renewal of his mandate for a second 5-year term, his Prosperity Party recorded a landslide victory, winning 410 out of the 436 federal parliamentary seats. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is, however, beginning his new term in office at a time the nearly 1-year deadly conflict in the Tigray region is worsening humanitarian conditions in the area, weakening the economy of Ethiopia and affecting his image internationally. In a goodwill message, President Muhammadu Buhari expressed the conviction that the outcome of the elections not only reflects the people's desire for transformation, but also affirms their confidence in the Prime Minister's leadership, courage, and credentials.
We are all aware of the many challenges facing the people of Ethiopia, and we encourage all parties to come together in the interest of the unity, progress, and well-being of Ethiopia. Your Excellency, you therefore have a great opportunity to continue to work for the peace and stability of Ethiopia.
While wishing the Prime Minister a very successful tenure in office, President Muhammadu Buhari looks forward to a more fruitful and robust engagement between Nigeria and Ethiopia.
Nigeria, like many other countries, is counting on your leadership by expanding investment opportunities, deepening relations, and building trust at home and abroad. I assure you that Nigeria will continue to support the unity and territorial integrity of Ethiopia.
Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, who was earlier sworn in the House of the People's Representatives, pledged to execute his mandate with faith to the Constitution of Ethiopia. The challenges ahead, he emphasized, might be daunting but not insurmountable. Several heads of state and government attended the colorful and remarkable event in solidarity. From Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, Adamu Sambu, NTA News.
Government of the 36th state of the Federation is seeking an order of the Supreme Court compelling the federal government to take up the funding of the capital project for the State High Court, Sharia Court of Appeal, and Customary Court of Appeal. Counsel to the governors sought the order at the hearing of the suit filed by them at the Supreme Court. Judiciary correspondent Vera Chumoba reports that lawyers who appeared as friends of the court made submissions.
brought another order of the Supreme Court to compel the federal government to pay them 66 billion naira, being amount they have so far expended on capital projects for the 3 courts in their states. Plaintiff's counsel Augustine Alege SAN informed the panel of 7 justices of the court, led by Justice Mohammed Musa Datibe, that the courts are of the Federation and as such funding of their capital projects should flow from the Consolidated Revenue Fund. Section 81 of the Constitution should be invoked to place the responsibility of funding capital projects on the federal government. However, the Attorney General of the Federation, represented by Tijani Ghazali SAN, vehemently opposed the request of the state governments. The defendant counsel, who predicted his argument on the fact that while the issue of salaries and emoluments are expressly stated in the Constitution as the responsibility of the federal government, the section is silent on capital projects.
It constitutes an abuse of court process, res judicata, and issue escopel.
It is an innovation, it is a commendable one, and that we must begin to implement it such that judiciary will no longer be at the beck and call of a governor or of a president. I adopted certain interpretation of law which did not allow me to align with them.
The constitution is explicit. The federation is just to bear allowances and salaries, not capital expenditure.
After listening to the submission of the parties, Justice Datijo reserved judgment, which he said will be communicated to all parties. In Abuja, Biara Chinwuba, NTA News.
Nigeria has made significant progress on economic diversification in recent years through the federal government's support of critical sectors such as agriculture and ICT. This is the consensus of members of the business community in Abuja during the engagement with the African Peer Review Mission towards the validation of Nigeria's country's self-assessment report. Metaire Ikpe reports.
The fact that Nigeria is opened for transparent assessment of its governance processes is considered heartwarming by the African Peer Review Mission.
Very few presidents take this bold step to allow the other countries to come and review their policies.
The new 2020 KAMA law makes stringent provisions for transparency in the leadership, board and finances of corporate organizations, including not-for-profit organizations.
On corporate governance and ease of doing business, key players applauded the Nigerian government for marching words with action and moving away from over-dependence on oil within a short time.
The CBN loan has assisted some of the farmers to be able to get funds. Payment of the loan has been extended. The interest rate, a lot of issues have been waived.
Doing business becomes an easy approach. Coming into the country to set up business becomes an easy approach. And I think technology is also helping.
We have pieced our information together, even from the market women, the rural dwellers.
The validation of the country's self-assessment report will produce a new national plan of action.
It will consolidate our gains of democracy, proffer solution to it, and be able to champion a way forward for our future.
The APROM team will also compare notes with other sectors in the coming days and weeks. In Abuja, Metaire Ikpe, NTA News.
Social media platforms like Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram were shut down owing to an internal technical glitch. That's according to Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg, who tendered an apology for the failure, said there was no foul play. Information and communication technology correspondent Joseph Johnson reports.
For whatever reasons, the fact is, billions of people globally were for several hours, 6 hours actually, denied access to some social media platforms owned by an individual, Mark Zuckerberg. The social media platforms include Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram. While some Nigerians frown at the development, especially as businesses were negatively impacted, some others say it is high time Nigeria fast-tracked the development of indigenous apps and patronized them.
I'm used to Instagram, and I don't even know how I manage the situation. I wasn't like, this phone is useless, so I just dropped my phone because I don't see any need holding it when Instagram is not working and also WhatsApp is not working. it's not, to me, it's not good. And for one man to just hold the whole world at ransom at that 6 hours, I think it's something to talk about. Like, it's so disturbing. So I think the Facebook management have to do something fast about it so that it will not occur again.
He didn't really speak well for some persons, people that are online content creator and all of that. Yeah. And there's another aspect to it that we must see is that we have attached this thing to our existence. I read an article online that someone said she just sat down, she read her Bible, she called her grandpa, called her grandma, and she felt lonely. So we have so much attached our livelihoods to this thing.
Yesterday it was a bit frustrating because I could not access it, and I like making video calls with my friends, so it was really boring. So I had to make phone calls, we had to communicate through normal calls. It was not fun.
And it was like the world is going to an end or something. Because yesterday I was like, oh, Bracho is not even coming safe. That everybody should just be Abiyo. So that's how I felt yesterday.
Although the services have since been restored, but the development, many say, has shown how human interactions today are at the mercy of tech giants. Joseph Johnson, NTA News.
Joseph for that update. In review of recent seizures connected with trade in wildlife, the Nigerian Customs Service is to carry out a DNA test on seized pangolin scales and elephant tusk to ascertain the country of origin. The National Public Relations Officer of the service, Joseph Atta, said this is imperative to intensify its crackdown on illegal wildlife trade. Marco Olale reports.
Exactly 2 months ago, pangolin scales, claws and elephant tusks worth 22 billion naira were intercepted and seized by the Customs Strike Force Team Zone A. Just last month, donkey skins close to 12,000 pieces built for export were equally intercepted at their Papa ports. Like a stillborn defiling all medications, the trade in wildlife persists, and this time, more than 1,000 kilograms of pangolin scales and claws, carefully arranged in 15 sacks, were seized along Kudirat Abiola Way, Oregun, Lagos. The discovery was not accidental, but a product of credible intelligence in the process of further investigation to arrest other members of gang indicted in the August 4 seizure.
2 suspects have already been arrested in connection with this seizure. They will also be charged to court to answer for their crime.
The Customs, no doubt, is receiving support from the wildlife justice system and embassies of USA, UK, and Germany. But stopping the flow of this illicit trade is, however, instilling new ideas.
We have some of our international collaborators who are around to conduct a DNA test so that we really know exactly which country, which origin, and all that.
The clarion call from the Customs is that all members of the public must join the vanguard to end trade in endangered species for the preservation of the ecosystem. In Lagos, Michael Alale, NTA News.
The National Executive Council of the Joint Health Sector Union, JOHESU, and Assembly of Healthcare Professional Association has agreed that the strike billed to begin midnight of October 4th be put on hold until the outcome of a meeting with the federal government scheduled for the 6th of October. The NEC, in a communique signed by the Acting National Secretary, Matthew Ajotutu, on behalf of JOHESU National Chairman, says the union's leadership reasoned that it was necessary to give the federal government a conducive environment to present an update on the 6th of October and development with regards to the major demands of JOHESU, especially in the area of adjustment of COHES as it was done with commerce for doctors. The communique commended the federal government for the marginal paradigm shift in resolving some of its demands, particularly as it relates to the ongoing payment of outstanding COVID-19 inducement and asset allowance. Joheso added that in a bid to avoid an endless circus show, the Wednesday, October 6, 2021 meeting will be the ultimate litmus test to evaluate the seriousness of the government in resolving the adjustment of COES, which has lingered since January 2014, and also determine the depth of industrial harmony in the health sector. This is Panorama reaching you live from the Lagos Network Center of the NTA. Let's take a short break. The news continues shortly.
Nigerians, coronavirus is dangerous. It can kill. When you see this sign, high fever, cough, shortness of breath, drowsiness, pneumonia, don't panic, don't hide, don't embark in self-medication. Promptly visit the nearest medical facility. Report all cases to the nearest hospital. Prevention is key. Avoid contact with infected persons. Avoid crowded areas as much as possible. Wash your hands regularly. Use hand sanitizers. Your life is precious. Stay alive. Live long, live right. This message is sponsored by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture and the Nigerian Film Corporation. Nigerian Film Corporation, powering prosperity.
Glad to know that you're still there with us. And now to the issue of the day. In acknowledging the role of teachers and their significant contribution to nation building, UNESCO set aside October 5th of every year to celebrate and appreciate them. As the world marks this year's Teachers' Day, Diana Ajale examines strategies adopted to strengthen the education sector amidst COVID-19.
It has been established that no nation can fully develop without the active participation of youth. Education is an important path to achieving desired development. This buttresses the pivotal position of teachers to the growth of any society.
Tell them that school has what?
As the world continues to grapple with the coronavirus pandemic, this year's theme, Teachers at the Heart of Education Recovery, focuses on reviving the education system, which have been threatened by COVID-19 pandemic for almost 2 years. Apart from appreciating and accessing the required changes, the day is used to highlight issues relating to teachers' development and the teaching profession. The use of technology also plays a crucial role in bridging the gap and improving teaching and learning. In Nigeria, however, teachers over the years have been faced with many challenges, including poor remuneration, which have led to incessant industrial action, security issues as a result of frequent kidnapping and killing of students and teachers across many states. As the world marks this year's Teachers' Day, stakeholders in the education sector are calling for a more secure and conducive learning environment for enhanced service delivery.
Our desire is that government should put policies and programs in place that we attract brighter and younger generation to take up the teaching appointment.
Teachers' Day is an occasion that pays tribute to teachers and tends to resolve issues regarding the profession and tries to attract young minds towards the teaching profession. In Lagos, Diana Ajale, NTA News.
Joining me live in the studio is Folawe Omikole, a committed educationist with passion to improving the educational standard in the country. She led the Basic Education Committee of Human Capital Development Commission at the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've got to have you here. All right, straight to our discussion. The year 2020 was a very traumatic year for a lot of people, and the world was hit. We woke up and COVID-19 was here. The education sector was not spared in all of this. How do you think the theme for this year's celebration, Teachers' Day celebration, is accurate to addressing some of the issues we faced in 2020?
Thank you so much. And I think the theme is so apt for a time like this. teachers at the heart of the recovery. When you think about the experience that we went through, like you mentioned and highlighted, I don't know that it was only the Nigerian education system, but it was education system across the world that felt the impact of schools being locked down, schools being shut, whereby we realized that, certain communities they couldn't continue learning because they didn't have the technology to do so. Also, the students weren't trained to take ownership of their own learning. The teachers also didn't have resources to be able to navigate the education system the way it was. So when we think about the theme is so apt, because when you think about a human being, without the heart, it cannot function. That person can function. It's exactly the same thing with what the teacher means for the education system. There's research that has shown that no education system can surpass the quality of its teachers. I think what COVID-19 and the pandemic year showed to us was the critical role that teachers played within our education system. The teachers are the core of every education system. And I was fortunate enough to engage with some SS3 students post the pandemic when they were about to start writing their work exams. Yes. And a lot of them did not point to a technological platform that was supporting them to learn. It was the teacher who was organizing learning groups on WhatsApp, on Facebook, on Telegram. It was that teacher, and I sampled several students across different schools who were talking about the teachers who were using these technological tools to still engage them in learning, who were still sending home worksheets, who were still sending them guidelines on what they should learn and prepare. So when you think about that theme, our teachers are at the core of getting us out of this. Our teachers are at the core of helping us to, get back from all the learning loss. Our teachers are at the core from helping us, because, we also had social-emotional loss, not just, the cognitive, not just the content, but we also had a situation where, there was mental health issues with students. The students didn't feel engaged. The social attributes of being in school. Yes. Teachers who were able to build relationships, rebuild connections with their students, with parents of their students, were seen to have been successful, with their kids. So,
I want to take you from there. Now we're back. We're gradually returning to that back to school. Children are going back to school now. What are some of the things that we need to do, to ensure that we don't have the lapses we had last year? And how do we also help this profession, to improve? Teachers are respected all over the world, but it looks like things are gradually changing. How do we also help teachers?
So, one of the things that breaks my heart a lot of times when I speak to young, students, and you ask them what you want to become in future, before you find one student who would say teacher, you would have sampled at least 50 students who would say doctor, engineer, journalist, lawyer, and the likes. Nobody wants to become a teacher. But I tell you, it's the most noble profession where you can directly impact lives. But in translation, we don't see that. Teachers are not, we don't see that teachers are well taken care of. It's not a job that you look forward to. We're not putting them out there to share their stories, to share their passion of what they're doing, to share how they're impacting lives. You see what I mean? And so I think that we really need to celebrate our teachers, yes, but in celebrating them as well, let us provide the resources for them to be able to carry out their jobs, properly. Let's provide opportunities for them to really invest in themselves, in their professional development. Let us train our teachers and equip them. I've been working in a sector whereby I engage with some educators, and you hear them say things like, I've been teaching for the past 17 years, and I haven't gone on any refresher course.
Okay, I would have to cut you there because of time, but we are glad that our teachers have been celebrated, and we also celebrate you too for doing this for our teachers. I've been speaking with Miss Folawe Omekunle, an educationist. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. All right, moving on now, we go to sports update, and Olumide Iguntola is our guide.
The Super Eagles camp in Lagos officially opened on Monday ahead of the 2022 World Cup qualifying matches against Central African Republic. The first leg is slated for 7th October at the Teslim Balogun Stadium, while the Eagles will be away on the 10th for the reverse fixture. In a related development, head coach of Nigeria's Falconets, Christopher Danjuma, says the team will not underrate the under-20 women's national team from Central African Republic, when both sides clash in the second leg of the FIFA World Cup qualifier at the Mobolaji Johnson Arena, Lagos on Wednesday.
We are not coming to approach the match as if it was scored 7 already. We're coming to that match as if it's the match that gets us to qualify.
We promise to put smiles on every Nigerian faces and to make every each of Nigerians proud out there.
In grassroots football, Ebute Eletusura football team, a match champion of the maiden edition of the Unity Cup organized by Honorable Olanrewaju Afini, the lawmaker representing Lagos Island Constituency 2. The team smiled home with the title at the expense of campus football team.
The competition is about fostering love, so I hope that we can love our neighbors as ourselves.
And if you look at what these guys displayed today, they are international materials.
From Uyo, John Paul alumni reports that Blue Diamonds Cricket Club have emerged champions of the 2021 Ibom Cricket League.
And that's all on Panorama today. Thank you for watching. I am Kendi Adebisi.
NTA, you can't beat the rich.
Welcome to Abuja, the place that unites Nigeria.
Stop this senseless killing. All we need is one Nigeria.
I think we have come to the threshold of time when we need to seek for peace.
We need peace in this country. We need peace in Nigeria.
And together, we can pull through.
No matter where you come from,
Hausa, Igbo, or Yoruba.
We cannot achieve a better Nigeria by fighting.
Let us stand together in brotherhood and solidarity and strive for peace.
And not because of their tribal or their religion or whatsoever background.
Da zaman lafiya da kwanciyar hankali a cikin ƙasar Najeriya.
Let us support the government of the day to embrace peace in our nation.
Your Nigeria, our Nigeria, my Nigeria.
This message is brought to you by the Ambassador of Voice for Change Initiative, supported by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, and the Federal Capital Territory.
Fellow compatriots, if no single tribe or religion has defeated poverty, then no single tribe or religion can develop Nigeria. The success story of every state and capital is the contribution of every tribe and religion. Our Nigeria no be wazobia, no majorities or minorities. Every tribe and every religion still they hustle for naira when no get tribe or religion. So, my country people, let's join this movement that says naira no get tribe and use the naira to develop our naira land. Citizens first. Citizens before state of origin. Citizens before your religion. Citizens before your ethnic belonging. For participation, call 0902 739 5555.
This is the network service of the NTA.
With the theme, Building Resilience Through Hope to Recover from COVID-19, Rebuild Sustainably, Respond to the Needs of the Planet, Respect the Rights of People, and Revitalize the United Nations, world leaders converged on New York, United States, for the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly. On this episode of Environment Matters, we shall be reviewing major outcomes of the UN General Assembly, focusing on issues affecting the well-being of the environment, from climate change to renewable energy, sustainable development, and the United Nations Food System Summit. We shall begin with the general debate at UNGA 76, which was an opportunity for world leaders to deliver statements on global issues, at the core of which is climate change. Now, world leaders had the opportunity to make concrete commitments towards net zero by 2050, as well as the push for global climate financing to boost resilience and adaptation. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres set the stage with introduction of the annual report of the United Nations, which called for scaling of action if the Paris target must be achieved.
More ambition on mitigation means countries committing to carbon neutrality by mid-century and to concrete 2030 emissions reductions targets that will get us there, backed up with credible actions now. More ambition on finance means developing nations finally seeing the promised $100 billion a year for climate action, fully mobilizing the resources of both international financial institutions and the private sector too. And more ambition on adaptation means developed countries living up to their promise of credible support to developing countries to build resilience to save lives and livelihoods. And this means 50% of all climate finance provided by developed countries and multilateral development banks should be dedicated to adaptation.
We are no longer on the wrong path. Excellencies, we are on the edge of the cliff. I'm pleased to note that I will host a series of events on climate action. The first in the lead up to COP26 will help to build ambition and ensure that action is very much on the agenda. We must bridge the capacities needed to actually deliver on climate promises. It is one of the things to have innovative renewable technologies. It is an entirely different thing if a country or a community cannot absorb that technology. I believe we can close the gap.
The impact of climate change is already with us in Nigeria, manifesting in various ways. Conflict trigger, food insecurity, drying up of lakes, loss of livelihood, and youth migration, among others. The trend is the same in many other countries that are threatened by forest fires, rising seas, drought, and desertification. As leaders, we must create inclusive and gender-sensitive policies that address all issues connected to climate action for mitigation and resilience. This is why we are working on a transition to low-carbon economy consistent with achieving the Paris Climate Agreement on the Sustainable Development Goals.
Will we meet the threat of the challenging climate we're all feeling, already ravaging every part of our world with extreme weather? Or will we suffer the merciless march of ever-worsening droughts and floods, more intense fires and hurricanes, longer heat waves, and rising seas? Will we affirm and uphold the human dignity and human rights under which nations in common cause more than 7 decades ago formed this institution?
The SDG moment placed spotlight on the Sustainable Development Goals at the beginning of the United Nations General Assembly's High-Level Week. It came as the world experienced deeply uneven response to COVID-19 pandemic, which risks creating a two-tier recovery with significant implications for the advancement of the SDGs and scaling of climate actions, especially in developing countries. Convened by the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, the moment provided world leaders with a platform to showcase the bold plans, actions and solutions that are needed to end the COVID-19 pandemic, build climate resilience and capacity for adaptation, as well as set the world on course towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals.
We need to end the war on our planet. This means committing to zero emissions by 2050. Ambitious climate and biodiversity plans. No new coal plants after 2021, and mobilising $100 billion a year for climate action, and helping developing countries make the shift to green economies, a top priority of the upcoming COP26 meeting in
You, all of you are critical to global recovery. I urge you to work with your governments to put people first in their budgets and recovery plans. Dear friends, the pathway is there. The choice is ours. Let's move forward with hope and conviction.
The third ray on responding to the needs of the planet corresponds to a multitude of SDGs, including SDG 7 on clean energy, SDG 13 on climate action, and SDG 14 on the ocean and seas.
Expanding electricity must be addressed within the context of the ongoing worsening crisis that is climate change. Only by unleashing the power of clean energy will we be able to end energy poverty while protecting our planet. After a brief pause in 2020 when we all stayed home, emissions are back on the rise. Climate change is not a future challenge. We're already feeling its impact. The economic costs from extreme weather and wildfires were $1.3 trillion over the last 10 years. That's a 40% increase from the previous decade. And if we continue on this course, we will create an unlivable planet with the greatest suffering borne by those least responsible. In 2015, the world came together in Paris to commit to limit global warming, and we've made important progress since then. The cost of renewables continues to decline. Clean power is now often the most affordable option, and low-carbon fuels have surpassed coal as the largest source of electricity generation.
Meanwhile, a session on transformative action to conserve, sustainably use, restore and mainstream biological diversity featured some heads of state and government as well as civil society organizations to boost commitments towards ecosystem restoration and financing a nature-positive world.
As we are preparing for the next conference of the parties on biodiversity, I urge humanity to make strong and concrete commitments. It is time for humanity to make peace with nature for the sake of present and future generations.
Humanity is not above nature. We are a part of it. And the arrogance of thinking otherwise is costing us dearly. Now, we must appeal to nature to save us from a crisis of our own creation. A sixth mass extinction event produced by appalling degradation of the climate. Without urgent and drastic action, the consequences will be irreversible. Nature's value is non-negotiable. It provides us with culture and community. It supports jobs and industry. It builds resilience and underpins every aspect of sustainable development. And it is key to an inclusive and sustainable pandemic recovery.
On the sidelines of the United Nations 76th General Assembly, world leaders are committing to positive actions for the conservation of biological diversity to protect nature and the planet. President Muhammadu Buhari said Nigeria has increased its national parks, designated additional biosphere reserves, and placed other programs and policies in support of biodiversity preservation in the country.
On our part, our commitment to tackle and reverse the severe trend of biodiversity loss remains unwavering, as anchored on the following: regional and inter-regional cooperation, which we are currently championing, as well as creation of marine protected areas pursuant to the 30 by 30 agenda of the Convention on Biodiversity. Domestication of relevant international agreements, conventions, as well as laws and policies for the protection and the conservation of biodiversity. D. Leveraging the cooperation and partnerships of the development partners as well as international organizations and coalitions for concrete actions against deforestation and biodiversity loss. And E. Promotion and increased investments in climate-positive and nature-positive economy for sustainable environment and land use practices.
I am proud to announce that the European Union will double its funding on biodiversity, in particular for the most vulnerable countries in our new 7-year budget. This will support an ambitious and more effective new global biodiversity framework. We want to work with our international friends on a new generation of green alliances and partnerships. We aim to jointly step up our climate and biodiversity commitments across the globe. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it is time to make peace with nature. The future of humanity depends on how we treat our common home and the other species that share this planet with us. So let's act now, and let's act together to protect what we hold dear.
Another key feature of the United Nations 76th General Assembly is the high-level dialogue on energy, which tackled the twin crises of climate change and energy poverty to accelerate action towards clean, affordable energy for all. Commitments from stakeholders strengthened synergies with major intergovernmental processes on transport, oceans, biodiversity, gender equality, food systems and climate change, accelerated delivery of United Nations support and services for member states on energy-related issues at all levels. This session was monitored by Justin Bemuyi.
We must rapidly shift to decarbonized energy systems. By 2030, solar and wind capacity should quadruple to respectively 630 and 390 gigawatts added annual capacity. And we must intensify our efforts to improve energy efficiency. There must be no new coal plants built after 2021.
Our efforts to achieve net zero emissions by 2050 hinge on what is to be done during this decade. The renewable energy technologies needed to make this decade one of massive renewable energy expansion are already as cheap or cheaper than most fossil fuels. The science on this is clear. To follow a 1.5-degree pathway, the world will need to reduce emissions by 45% below 2010 levels by 2030. We need to have an integrated energy and climate perspective that allows us to put people and planet at the heart of all our initiatives.
We need to move beyond just high-level targets and focus on the actions that will help us deliver on all our common goals.
We are all at a critical point for the global energy sector, as we now have less than 10 years to go until the SDG 7 deadline, and we remain off track for achieving universal access by 2030. This should be viewed as a global emergency, as without achieving SDG 7 by 2030, we cannot achieve a global energy transition to net zero by 2050.
The high-level dialogue on energy is to tackle the twin crises of climate change and energy poverty, to accelerate action towards clean, affordable energy for all that will reduce emissions and provide energy to the 759 million people who presently lack access to electricity and the 2.6 billion who cook with unhealthy fuels. More than 35 countries, including Arab and Gulf states, took part in the conference, and many announced funding and partnerships that will assist in domestic and global transitions toward a sustainable energy system.
But in truth, this is not a dilemma. We can expand access to energy. We can cut emissions at the same time if we accelerate a transition to clean, efficient, and affordable energy.
I must add, however, that without the financing to execute, our commitments will all mean nothing. The Global North must also support with a clean energy offer to help developing nations achieve universal access by 2030. In addition to financing, another key success factor for a just transition is global political alignment on the role of gas.
There is a transition that has to be just, and it has to, in a sense, reflect the realities of every individual country. Clearly, I would argue we are living in the midst of an energy revolution, but it will happen in different ways and in different combinations, and yes, sometimes on different pathways. Yet, there is a clear danger that entire countries could be left behind. This is the challenge for any government and any decision maker at this moment. If current trends continue to 2030, over 500 million people, for example, still won't have electricity access. And this is the 21st century. This lack of energy access is simply unacceptable and unnecessary when we have the technology to solve this. Everything from solar-powered water pumps to smart energy grids and beyond.
The catalytic finance promise of the Alliance of Rural Electrification will really lead the way. It is also great to see the private sector aligned on the need to merge the energy and climate agendas, with several commitments to deploy large-scale renewables and provide energy access.
Governments across the globe rolled out ambitious commitments which are voluntary on Sustainable Development Goal 7 by 2030, known as Energy Compacts.
Perhaps one of the most anticipated events in 2021 is the United Nations Food Systems Summit, which is part of the Decade of Action to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals (SDGs) by 2030. The summit launched bold new actions to deliver progress on all 17 SDGs, each of which relies to some degree on healthier, more sustainable and equitable food systems. It also highlighted opportunities for food systems that support natural ecosystems and reduce carbon emissions for sustainable environment.
Deuxièmement,
second, we need food systems that protect our planet. It is possible to feed a growing global population while also safeguarding our environment. It takes sustainable consumption and production methods and nature-based solutions. It takes the smart, sustainable management of natural resources from farms to fisheries. And it takes countries coming to COP26 in Glasgow with bold, targeted plans to keep the promise of the Paris Agreement.
Millions of people in Africa are said to go to bed every day without food. And this is in spite of the fact that 1/3 of food produced is lost or wasted. President Muhammadu Buhari says Nigeria is committed to changing the tide with reforms in the agriculture sector.
Following the recommendations from the dialogues and our plan to lift 100 million Nigerians out of poverty within a decade, Nigeria is committed to supporting private sector investments in food storage and transportation, investing in food security and nutrition knowledge dissemination, skills development, and information management systems to enhance agricultural productivity. Building sustainable, responsive, and inclusive food systems by integrating our medium-term National Development Plan 21 to 2025 and the National Poverty Reduction and Growth Strategy and the Food Nutrition Policy, enhancing the productivity of smallholder farmers and empowering women and youth for greater access to food production and processing assets and resources.
SDG Moment is also a solution summit that required everyone to take action to transform how the world produces and consumes food. The summit brought together key players from the world of science, business, policy, healthcare and academia, as well as farmers, indigenous people, youth organizations, consumer groups, environmental activists and other key stakeholders. That's it on this episode of Environment Matters. My name is Onengiye Fineface. Thanks for watching. Make it a date with us in our next episode. Bye-bye.
We want to talk about rights, there are obligations. I'm not saying that this government is a saint, it's very far from it. But there are things that we can do to make it better, and that's the challenge I'm throwing to you. You don't want to build this nation? I don't know where else you want to go. If I had a choice, I'll come back. When I stand outside and I hear what you have to say about this country that I know that I can die for as one, then I'm really sad because you're young. You have education. You have tools. You have a huge future ahead of you. And you're condemning yourself before you started on that journey. So please don't do that. Please don't.